Captain Jinho adjusted his military uniform one last time before entering the Grand Hall. The fabric felt stiff against his skin, but he knew this moment would define not just his future, but Earth's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. The massive doors opened with a soft whoosh, revealing a chamber that took his breath away. The hall stretched out before him like a cathedral made of starlight, alien architecture twisted and curved in ways that human eyes struggled to follow. Crystals embedded in the walls pulsed with soft colors, casting dancing shadows across the floor. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the space, their various forms creating a living rainbow of life. Admiral Minho appeared at his side, his weathered face serious. "Remember what we discussed, Jinho. This isn't just about you anymore. Every human on Earth will judge our species by who you choose today." Jinho nodded, though his stomach churned with nervousness. The bonding trials happened only once every 50 years. Each species sent their finest representative to choose a mate from another world. These unions created bonds between civilizations, preventing wars and building trust across the stars. "Look at them," Minho continued, gesturing toward the center of the hall where female representatives from various species gathered. The Valorians with their diamond skin catch light like living jewels. The Netherians float like clouds of pure energy. Any one of them would make Earth proud. The ceremony began with ancient words spoken in the universal tongue. Jinho watched as beings he had only seen in textbooks moved with grace around the ceremonial circle. Each species had sent their most beautiful, their most perfect examples of their race. A Valorian female stepped forward first. Her translucent skin sparkled as light passed through her crystalline body. She moved like music made solid, every step creating tiny, bell-like sounds. The assembled crowd murmured in appreciation. She was undeniably beautiful, her alien features arranged in perfect harmony. Next came a Netherian, her form shifting between solid and energy. Blue and silver light danced around her edges, and where she stepped, small flowers of light bloomed and faded. Her face held an otherworldly serenity that made several delegates lean forward in wonder. One by one, they came forward, each more stunning than the last, each representing the pinnacle of their species' beauty and grace. Jinho felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Choose wrong, and Earth might find itself isolated from the galactic community. Then, the hall fell silent. She entered from the far door, and every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Several smaller aliens actually took steps backward. A few delegates reached instinctively for weapons that weren't there. Nara stood 8 feet tall, her obsidian exoskeleton gleaming like black metal under the crystal lights. 4 arms moved with controlled precision at her sides, each ending in claws that could tear through steel. Her face was alien in the most frightening way. Mandibles that could crush bone framed a mouth filled with sharp teeth. 6 compound, eyes reflected the light like dark mirrors, taking in everything around her with predatory awareness. She belonged to the Korthak, a species known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable warriors. Stories of their battles were told to frighten children on 100 worlds. Their very presence meant violence was near. "Dear God," someone whispered behind Jinho. "Why did they send her?" Nara moved to take her place among the other females, and they parted before her like water before a ship. She stood alone in a circle of empty space, her alien features unreadable. Admiral Minho grabbed Jinho's arm. "Don't even think about it. Choose one of the others. Any of the others." But Jinho couldn't look away. As the ceremony continued around them, something happened that changed everything. A small alien child, no bigger than a human toddler, was playing near the ceremonial displays. The little one stumbled and knocked over a crystal sculpture, sending it tumbling toward the hard floor. In the blink of an eye, Nara moved. Her massive form flowed like water, covering the distance in 2 silent steps. One of her terrifying claws shot out and caught the crystal just inches from the ground, but the catch was so gentle, so perfectly controlled, that the delicate artwork didn't even shake. The child looked up at this towering monster with wide eyes. Nara carefully placed the crystal back on its stand, then knelt down to the child's level. With movements so precise they seemed impossible for such large hands, she straightened the little one's ceremonial clothes and patted their head with the back of her claw. The child smiled and ran back to their parents. Jinho felt something shift in his chest. While everyone else saw a nightmare, he had just witnessed something beautiful. This terrifying creature had shown more grace and control in those few seconds than most beings managed in a lifetime. "The selections will now begin," announced the ceremony master. "Let each representative choose their bonded partner for the next age." Representatives from other species stepped forward, each claiming one of the beautiful females. The Valorian was chosen by a being of living metal. The Netherian accepted a plant-like creature whose bark shimmered with golden patterns. One by one, the perfect matches were made. Finally, only Jinho remained. The hall turned to watch him, thousands of alien eyes waiting to see which beauty Earth's representative would claim. Admiral Minho sent him a meaningful look. Choose carefully, choose safely, choose what everyone expected. Jinho stepped forward and walked past the remaining females. Their beauty was undeniable, their grace perfect. Any one of them would satisfy the crowd, would make Earth look good in galactic society. He stopped in front of Nara. Up close, she was even more terrifying. Her exoskeleton bore scars from old battles. Her claws caught the light like black diamonds. Her compound eyes studied him with an intelligence that was both alien and somehow familiar. "I choose her," Jinho said clearly, his voice carrying across the silent hall. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. Delegates began talking all at once, their voices mixing in a dozen languages. Someone laughed in disbelief. Another voice called out in shock. Admiral Minho's face went pale. "Jinho, what have you done?" But Jinho wasn't listening to the crowd. He was watching Nara's face, or trying to read what emotions might show on such alien features. Her compound eyes seemed to focus on him with new intensity. Her head tilted slightly to one side, like a question. For just a moment, he thought, he saw something in those dark eyes that looked almost like surprise, and maybe, just maybe, gratitude. The ceremony master struck a ceremonial gong, and the noise slowly died down. "The choices are made. Let the bonding trials begin." As the crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with shocked conversation about Earth's impossible choice, Jinho found himself standing face to face with his new partner. She towered over him, her presence both terrifying and somehow reassuring. "You chose me," she said. Her voice filtered through the translation device, sounding like wind through metal. "Why?" Jinho looked up at her, his decision feeling more right, with each passing second. "Because I think you're special, and I think everyone else is too scared to see it." One of her claws moved slightly, the gesture almost like a nod. "Perhaps," she said quietly. "You are special too." The bonding chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of alien technology. Jinho sat across from Nara, neural linking cables connecting them both to a machine that looked like a cross between a computer and a living plant. The Galactic Alliance had perfected this process over thousands of years. It allowed two beings from different species to share thoughts and emotions, creating bonds that went deeper than simple marriage. "Are you ready?" asked Dr. Kayla, the Etherian technician overseeing their session. Her blue skin glowed softly in the dim light, and her 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she checked the equipment. Jinho nodded, though his hands were shaking. Slightly. Beside him, Nara sat perfectly still, her forearms folded in her lap. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights, making it impossible to tell what she was thinking. "The process will allow you to share memories and emotions," Dr. Kayla explained. "Many couples find it overwhelming at first. Do not fight the connection. Let it flow naturally." The machine activated with a soft chime. Immediately, Jinho felt something strange happening inside his head. It was like someone had opened a door in his mind that he never knew existed. Warmth flooded through him, but it wasn't his warmth. These were emotions coming from someone else. Then the memories began. Jinho, saw flashes of Nara's life like scenes from a movie. She was young, smaller than other Korthak children but already deadly looking. In the memory, she watched older Korthak warriors practicing their combat skills, tearing apart metal targets with their claws. But instead of joining them, young Nara sat apart, carefully practicing on pieces of soft clay. While the others learned to destroy, she was teaching her self-control. Hour after hour, she would work to touch the clay without leaving a mark, to move her claws without cutting anything. The scene shifted. Nara was older now, in what looked like a medical facility. Her terrifying claws were working inside the body of an injured alien, but her movements were so precise that she could operate on tissue thinner than paper without damage. She was saving lives while her fellow Korthak were trained only to take them. Another memory, Nara walking through a crowded marketplace on her homeworld. Other Korthak moved aside as she passed, their body language showing fear and disgust. Jinho could feel her emotions during this memory: sadness, loneliness, and a deep desire to belong somewhere. The gentle claw, voices whispered as she passed. It was meant as an insult. On a world where strength and violence were valued above all else, being gentle made you weak. Being careful made you worthless. The memory flow reversed, and suddenly Nara was experiencing Jinho's memories. She saw his childhood on Earth, playing with his sister Yunji in their backyard garden. She felt his wonder the first time he saw pictures of alien worlds, his dream of joining the space program so he could meet beings from other planets. She experienced his military training, his rise through the ranks, and finally, his selection for this mission. Through his memories, she felt something she had never experienced from another being, someone who was curious about differences instead of afraid of them. "You study us." Her voice came through the translation device. "Your people try to understand, rather than simply fear." "Some of us do," Jinho replied. Others are still learning." The neural link deepened. Now they were sharing real-time emotions and thoughts. Jinho felt Nara's constant awareness of her own strength, the careful control she maintained every second to avoid accidentally hurting someone. It was exhausting, like walking on a tightrope that never ended. "I volunteered for this ceremony," she told him through their connection. "I knew no one would choose me, but I hoped someone might see that not all Korthak are the same." "Why is being different so hard for your people?" Jinho asked. Images flowed from her mind to his. The Korthak homeworld was harsh, full of predators and deadly storms. For thousands of years, only the strongest and most aggressive had survived. Their culture had built itself around this reality. Violence was not just accepted, it was required. "But you found another way," Jinho said. "I found medicine," Nara replied. "I learned that creation requires more skill than destruction, but my people see this as weakness." Over the next 2 days, they shared more memories and thoughts. Jinho learned that Nara had taught herself 17 different languages, that she could perform surgery on dozens of alien species, and that she had never killed another being despite being capable of incredible violence. Nara learned that Jinho had always been fascinated by the different ways life could exist in the universe. She saw his memories of studying alien biology textbooks, of practicing alien languages, of dreaming about the day when different species could truly understand each other. On the second day, other human delegates arrived to observe their progress. Commander Hyunwoo looked troubled as he watched the bonding process through the observation window. "This is madness," he told Admiral Minho. She could snap his neck without thinking about it. The Korthak are berserkers. Everyone knows this. But Jinho's sister Yunji had been doing her own research. She arrived with data files and charts, spreading them across a table in the adjacent room. "Look at this," she said, pointing to brain scan images. "Korthak neural structure is far more complex than we thought. They have specialized clusters that control fine motor skills and emotional regulation. They're not mindless killers. They're actually capable of incredible precision and empathy." "Then why are they known for violence?" Admiral Minho asked. "Because that's all we've seen of them," Yunji replied. "We've only encountered their warriors and soldiers. But look at these medical records from their homeworld. They have doctors, artists, teachers, just like any other civilization. We've been judging the entire species based on their military. Back in the bonding chamber, Jinho and Nara's connection grew stronger. They began to communicate without words, sharing feelings and concepts directly. Through their link, Jinho experienced what it was like to be constantly feared and misunderstood. Nara felt what it was like to be accepted and valued for who you really were. On the third day, something beautiful happened. As their minds fully synchronized, Jinho felt Nara's surprise and joy at being chosen. For the first time in her life, someone had looked past her frightening appearance to see her true self. "I was prepared to be rejected," she admitted. "I thought I would return home having proven only that even gentle Korthak are unwanted. Instead," Jinho replied, "you proved that the right person will always see who you really are." Through their bond, he felt her happiness, not the simple pleasure of a human smile, but something deeper and more complex. It was the joy of finally being understood, of finding someone who valued her gentleness instead of fearing her strength. The bonding ceremony concluded with a ritual exchange of personal items. Jinho gave Nara a small earth flower that his sister had preserved in crystal. Despite her massive claws, Nara accepted it with movements so careful that she didn't even disturb the delicate petals. In return, Nara gave Jinho a small carving made from Korthak bone. It was incredibly intricate, a tiny bird with its wings spread in flight. The detail work was so fine that it must have taken hundreds of hours to complete. "You made this?" Jinho asked, amazed. "I make many such things," Nara replied. "My claws allow for very precise work, when used correctly." As they left the bonding chamber, now linked for life, Jinho felt a sense of completion he had never experienced before. Through their connection, he could feel Nara's emotions mixing with his own, her cautious hope, her gratitude, and underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. "What happens now?" he asked as they walked toward the transport that would take them to Earth. "Now," Nara said, her voice softer than he had heard it before, "we find out if your people can learn to see what you see in me." Commander Hyunwoo was waiting by the transport, his face grim. "Jinho, I hope you know what you've done. Earth's reaction to your choice has been complicated." Through their neural link, Jinho felt Nara's fear spike. She had hoped for acceptance, but expected rejection. Now it seemed her worst fears might come true. "Don't worry," Jinho told her through their bond. "If they can't see how special you are, I'll just have to show them." But as their transport lifted off toward Earth, both of them wondered if love and understanding would be enough to overcome centuries of fear and prejudice. The transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Jinho watched through the viewport as his home planet grew larger. White clouds swirled over blue oceans, and the familiar continents spread out below them like a map come to life. It should have been a moment of joy, returning home after completing his mission. Instead, his stomach was tight with worry. Through their neural bond, he could feel Nara's emotions mixing with his own. She sat perfectly still in her specially reinforced seat, but her mind was full of anxiety. She had seen the news reports during their journey home. Earth's reaction to their bonding had been swift and harsh. Protesters gathered outside the global defense headquarters today, the news anchor Soman had reported. Many citizens are demanding answers about Earth's representative choosing what they call a monster over beautiful alien females who could have strengthened our galactic relationships. The transport touched down at Seoul Spaceport, and immediately they could hear the crowd outside. Thousands of voices chanted slogans, some supporting Jinho's choice but most expressing fear and anger. "Monster lover!" someone screamed as they exited the ship. "You've doomed us all!" Security forces formed a barrier around them, but the hostile energy was overwhelming. Signs waved in the air with pictures of Nara's face crossed out in red. Others showed images of beautiful Valorians and Netherians with text asking, "Why not them?" Admiral Minho met them at the security checkpoint. His face looked older than when Jinho had left, worry lines deep around his eyes. "It's been difficult," he admitted quietly. "Half the population thinks you made a brave choice for love. The other half thinks you've brought a killer into our home. They were transported to a secure facility on the outskirts of the city, a place where alien visitors usually stayed during diplomatic visits. The building was surrounded by high walls and guard towers, making it feel more like a prison than a home. This is temporary, Admiral Minho assured them as they were shown to their quarters, until the public anger dies down. But through their bond, Jinho felt Nara's sadness growing stronger. She had hoped for acceptance, maybe even friendship with humans. Instead, she was being treated like a dangerous animal that needed to be caged. The rooms were large and well-equipped, but Nara barely looked at them. She went straight to the window and stared out at the city beyond the walls. Her 4 hands pressed against the glass, and Jinho could feel her loneliness like a physical pain in his chest. "They hate me," she said simply, "just as my own people did." "They don't know you," Jinho replied, moving to stand beside her. "Give them time." But time seemed to make things worse, not better. Military psychologist Daiho arrived the next day with a team of doctors and scientists. They wanted to study Nara, to run tests and scans to determine if she was dangerous to Maoyo, human society. "This is standard procedure," Daiho explained, but his tone suggested he believed Nara was indeed a threat. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." The tests were humiliating. They measured her strength, recorded her reflexes, and analyzed her biological functions like she was a specimen rather than a person. Nara endured it all without complaint, but Jinho felt every moment of her shame through their connection. Worse were the interviews. Teams of experts asked her questions designed to reveal violent tendencies or hidden aggression. They seemed disappointed when her answers showed only gentleness and control. "According to our records," one interviewer said, "your species has been involved in 17 major conflicts over the past century. How do we know you won't revert to your natural violent tendencies?" "The same way you know any human won't become violent," Nara replied calmly. "You judge me by my actions, not my species." But her reasonable answers only seemed to frustrate them more. They had expected a monster and found a person instead, which somehow made them more suspicious rather than less. While Nara was being tested, Jinho faced his own challenges. Commander Hyunwoo brought him reports of the ongoing protests, of politicians calling for his court-martial, and of other nations questioning whether Earth could be trusted in galactic affairs. "You have to understand," Hyunwoo said during one of their meetings. "Your choice affects all of humanity's standing in the galaxy. If this goes wrong, it could set back our diplomatic relationships by decades." The breaking point came 3 weeks after their return. Jinho was attending a mandatory debriefing session at military headquarters when the facility's alarm system suddenly went silent. Security protocols that should have been automatic simply stopped working. Nara was alone in their quarters, tending to a small garden she had started on the balcony. She had been learning about earth plants, carefully nurturing flowers and herbs, with the same gentle precision she used in surgery. Her massive claws worked among the delicate stems like a surgeon's tools, never damaging even the smallest leaf. The protesters arrived in vehicles, led by a former soldier named Wonho, who had been speaking at rallies against alien contamination for weeks. Somehow they had disabled the security systems and breached the facility's walls. 30 angry humans surrounded the building, carrying clubs and improvised weapons. They had come expecting to find a cowering monster, ready to drive out the alien threat that their government had forced upon them. Instead, they found Nara kneeling in her garden, water droplets from her watering can catching the afternoon sunlight like tiny crystals. She looked up as they approached, and several protesters took an involuntary step backward. Even prepared for her appearance, the reality of facing a Korthak was overwhelming. "There it is," Wonho shouted, raising his weapon. "The monster that's going to corrupt our world." Nara slowly stood up, her full 8-foot height making her tower over the crowd. Her forearms hung at her sides, claws glinting in the sunlight. She could have torn through all of them in seconds. Every person there knew it. But she didn't move to defend herself. Through their bond, Jinho felt her resignation. She had tried so hard to prove she wasn't a monster, But if humans had decided she was one anyway, then perhaps it was time to accept their judgment. "I will not fight you," she said quietly. "If my death will bring your people peace, then I accept it." The crowd hesitated. This wasn't the reaction they had expected. Monsters were supposed to fight back to prove their dangerous nature. They weren't supposed to offer themselves up for sacrifice. That's when Taiyang appeared. The old man was Jinho's neighbor, a veteran of the Third Colonial War who had lost his right arm in service to Earth. He walked with a cane and moved slowly, but he stepped directly between Nara and the angry crowd without hesitation. "I've seen real monsters," he said, his voice carrying despite his age. "I've fought them on 3 different worlds. They don't spend their afternoons learning to water roses without breaking the stems." "Get out of the way, old man," Wanho snarled. "That thing is dangerous." "Dangerous?" Taiyang laughed. "Son, last week I dropped my medication pills on the floor. These old hands couldn't pick them up. You know who helped me? She did. Spent 20 minutes on her hands and knees, using claws that could cut through steel to carefully collect tiny pills without crushing a single one." More people were arriving now. Neighbors who had been watching from their windows, security forces responding to the breach, and news crews drawn by the commotion. The protesters found themselves surrounded by cameras and witnesses. She reads, "To the children at the local hospital," continued Taiyang. "Did you know that? 3 times a week she goes there and reads stories. The kids aren't afraid of her anymore. They climb on her like she's playground equipment, and she's so careful with them that she makes human nurses look clumsy." Jinho arrived with the security team just as the standoff was reaching its peak. Through their bond, he felt Nara's gratitude toward Taiyang, but also her deep sadness. Even with defenders, she was still seen as something that needed defending. Against rather than someone worth defending. The crowd dispersed without violence, but the damage to Nara's spirit was complete. That evening, as they sat together in their quarters, she made a decision that broke Jinho's heart. "I want to return to Korthak space," she said. "This bonding was a mistake. I thought I could prove that my species could be different, but I've only brought shame to both our peoples." "You haven't brought shame to anyone," Jinho protested. "You've brought hope. People like Taiyang can see it." "One old man sees it," Nara replied. "The rest of your world sees only a monster that their government forced them to accept." Through their neural link, Jinho felt her decision solidifying. She believed that leaving would be best for everyone, that her presence was causing more harm than good. But he also felt something else through their connection. Despite her sadness, despite her resignation, there was still a tiny flame of hope burning in her heart. She wanted to believe that understanding was possible, that acceptance could grow from fear. That small flame gave Jinho an idea. If words couldn't change minds, maybe actions could. If Nara couldn't prove her worth through gentleness alone, maybe she needed a chance to show what her unique abilities could accomplish when applied to helping others. He just needed to find the right opportunity. "Don't give up yet," he told her through their bond. "Sometimes the most important changes start with the smallest actions. Let me show them who you really are." 3 days later, Jinho's plan began to take shape. He had contacted Dr. Isul, the most respected xenopsychologist in the Galactic Alliance. If anyone could prove Nara's true nature to both humans and aliens across the galaxy, it would be her. Dr. Isul arrived at their facility with a team of assistants and enough equipment to fill a small laboratory. She was a tall, elegant woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything they looked at. "I've studied the reports about your bonding," she told Jinho and Nara during their first meeting. "The results are quite unusual. I'd like to conduct a full psychological evaluation, with your permission." "What kind of evaluation?" Nara asked carefully. She had endured enough tests and examinations since arriving on Earth. "Nothing invasive," Dr. Isul assured her. "I want to understand your mental patterns, your emotional responses, your problem-solving methods. Think of it as a conversation rather than a test." What made this evaluation different was Dr. Isul's reputation. When she announced that she would be conducting a live public assessment of Earth's controversial alien bride, news networks across 3 solar systems picked up the story. For the first time since the bonding ceremony, the galaxy would be watching to see what kind of being Jinho had really chosen. The evaluation was set to take place over 5 days, broadcast live from the facility. On the first morning, millions of beings across dozens of worlds tuned in to watch the proceedings. The viewing room was packed with reporters, government officials, and curious citizens. Dr. Isul began with simple questions about Nara's background and training. The xenopsychologist's calm, professional manner put Nara at ease, and her answers came freely. She spoke about her medical education, her work with injured aliens, and her decision to volunteer for the bonding ceremony. "You say you're a surgeon?" Dr. Isul noted, reviewing her notes. "But your species is known primarily for warfare. How did you choose such a different path?" "The same skills that make us effective warriors also make us capable healers," Nara replied. "Precision, control, understanding of anatomy. I simply chose to use these abilities to save lives rather than take them." The second day focused on practical demonstrations. Dr. Isul brought in various objects and asked Nara to manipulate them with her claws. The audience watched in amazement as the feared Korthak warrior picked up soap bubbles without bursting them, threaded needles with surgical precision, and assembled intricate electronic components with movements too fast and accurate for human eyes to follow. "Remarkable," Dr. Isul murmured, making notes. "Your fine motor control exceeds that of most surgical robots." But it was on the third day that everything changed. The evaluation was proceeding normally when alarms suddenly began, blaring throughout the facility. Emergency broadcasts interrupted the live feed as news anchors struggled to report breaking information. "We're receiving reports of a catastrophic failure aboard the diplomatic transport Harmony," announced a clearly shaken newsreader. "The ship is carrying VIPs from 17 different species and is currently breaking apart in Earth's orbital space." Through the facility's windows, they could see the bright streak of debris burning through the atmosphere. The Harmony was one of the largest diplomatic vessels in the galaxy, designed to carry high-ranking officials between worlds safely. If it was breaking up, hundreds of beings were about to die. "Earth Defense Force ships are responding," the newsreader continued, "but they lack the capability to navigate safely through the debris field. The wreckage is too dense and unstable for human rescue craft." Dr. Isul was receiving updates through her communication device. 43 beings are confirmed alive in various sections of the wreckage, she reported to the room. But human rescue technology isn't advanced enough to reach them safely. That's when Nara stood up. "I can reach them," she said quietly. The room fell silent. Admiral Minho, who had been observing the evaluation, shook his head immediately. "Absolutely not. The risk is too great. My exoskeleton can survive in space for short periods," Nara continued, ignoring the objection. "My 4 arms give me advantages in zero gravity that 2-armed beings don't have. My compound eyes allow me to track multiple objects simultaneously." "It's suicide," Commander Hunwoo protested. "The debris field is constantly shifting. One piece of wreckage could kill you instantly." Through their neural bond, Jinho felt Nara's determination. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. There were people dying who she might be able to save. For a being whose entire life had been dedicated to preserving life, that was all that mattered. "I volunteer for the rescue mission," she said formally. The next few minutes were chaos. Military officials argued about protocols and safety procedures, while rescue coordinators tried to organize a response. But time was running out for the survivors aboard the Harmony. Finally, Dr. Isul spoke up. "Let her go," she said quietly. "This is exactly what my evaluation has been trying to measure, how she responds when others are in danger." An hour later, Nara was sealed inside a specially modified rescue pod, launched toward the debris field high above Earth. The entire operation was being broadcast live across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the pod approached the twisted remains of what had once been a beautiful starship. The first challenge was navigating through the debris field itself. Chunks of metal and crystal tumbled through space in unpredictable patterns, each piece large enough to destroy a rescue vehicle. But Nara's compound eyes could track dozens of objects at once, plotting safe paths through the chaos with inhuman precision. Her voice came through the communication system, calm and professional. "I have visual contact with the first survivor. Podorn beginning approach." The rescue that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Nara's 4 arms allowed her to work on multiple tasks simultaneously, cutting through twisted metal with 2 hands, while stabilizing wreckage with the other 2. Her natural armor protected her from impacts that would have killed a human rescuer. The first survivor was a Valorian child, whose breathing apparatus had been damaged in the crash. Working in the vacuum of space, Nara performed emergency surgery, using her mandibles to create an air seal while her claws repaired the damaged equipment, with movements too precise for the cameras to follow clearly. "Survivor 1 stabilized," she reported, moving to Pod 2. One by one, she extracted trapped beings from sections of wreckage that human technology couldn't have reached safely. A Netherian diplomat whose energy form was leaking into space. An elderly Korthak warrior who had been crushed under debris. 3 human technicians trapped in a collapsed maintenance section. Each rescue required different skills. For the Netherian, she had to construct a temporary containment field using salvaged ship components. For the Korthak warrior, a being from her own species who would normally see her as weak, she used her surgical knowledge to stabilize massive internal injuries while working in zero gravity. The most challenging rescue came near the end. A section of the ship's hull had folded in on itself, trapping 5 survivors in a space barely larger than a closet. The metal was twisted so tightly that any attempt to cut through it might collapse the entire section and kill everyone inside. "This is impossible," one of the Earth Defense Force coordinators said. "There's no way to reach them safely." But Nara was already moving. Using her claws like precision instruments, she began to carefully peel back layers of twisted metal, each cut calculated to relieve pressure without compromising the structure. It was like performing surgery on a building, requiring perfect understanding of physics and engineering as well as medical knowledge. The process took 2 hours. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched in silence as the feared Korthak warrior worked with infinite patience to save 5 lives that no one else could reach. When the last survivor was finally extracted and safely aboard the rescue pod, the communication system crackled with reports from across the galaxy. The rescue had been broadcast to every member world of the Galactic Alliance. 43 survivors recovered, came the final report. 0 casualties. All being stabilized and receiving medical attention. As Nara's rescue pod returned to Earth, something had fundamentally changed in how the galaxy viewed her. The news networks that had spent weeks calling her dangerous were now calling her a hero. The protesters who had demanded her removal were replaced by crowds gathering to thank. Her Dr. Isil was waiting when Nara emerged from the pod exhausted but unharmed. The xenopsychologist's evaluation was complete, but now she had data that no one had expected. "Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy," Dr. Isil announced during the live broadcast of her final report, "I have studied thousands of beings from hundreds of species. I have never encountered anyone with empathy levels that exceed our measurement capabilities." She gestured toward Nara, who stood quietly beside Jinho. "This individual doesn't simply lack aggressive tendencies. She possesses a level of compassion and dedication to preserving life that represents the highest ideals of any civilization." The report continued with detailed analysis of Nara's psychological profile, but the conclusion was clear. The monster that everyone had feared was actually one of the most compassionate beings the galaxy had ever encountered. In the days that followed, everything changed. Commander Ji-Young. 6 months after the rescue that changed everything, Jinho stood in what had once been their secure facility and watched it transform into something beautiful. The walls that had once kept Nara isolated from the world had been removed, replaced by open spaces filled with beings from dozens of different species. The Integration Center, as it was now called, had become a symbol of what was possible when fear gave way to understanding. Young beings from across the galaxy came here to study, learn, and most importantly, to see past the surface differences that had divided their species for centuries. Nara moved through the center like a gentle giant, her 4 arms carrying supplies. to different classrooms while her compound eyes kept track of dozens of students at once. Where humans had once seen a monster, they now saw a teacher whose infinite patience never wavered, no matter how many questions she was asked. Dr. Nara called out a small human child from the medical training room. "Can you show us the precision technique again?" Jinho smiled as he watched his partner kneel down to the child's level, her terrifying claws becoming instruments of education. She had earned the title doctor through her work with human physicians, teaching surgical techniques that had revolutionized emergency medicine on Earth. The change hadn't been immediate or easy. Fear built up over centuries didn't disappear overnight. But the rescue of the Harmony had cracked something open in the galaxy's collective mind, and people had begun to see Korthak, all Korthak, differently. The first young Korthak to arrive at the center was Kyung, barely an adult by his species' standards but already showing signs of being different from his warrior-focused culture. Like Nara, he was interested in healing rather than hurting. "I saw your rescue on the galactic networks," he had told Nara during his first day. "I never knew our people could be heroes instead of just soldiers." Now, Kyung worked alongside human doctors in the center's medical wing, his natural precision making him an excellent surgeon. Other young Korthak had followed. Hana, who studied xenobiology, Bora, who specialized in trauma medicine, and dozens of others who had never found a place in their warrior society. But the center wasn't just changing how others saw the Korthak. It was changing how the Korthak saw themselves. The transformation reached its peak when an emergency message arrived from Korthak Prime. Jinho was in his office reviewing student applications when Nara burst through the door, her usual calm demeanor replaced by urgent concern. "My people," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "There's a plague affecting our young. The larvae are dying and our doctors don't know how to save them." Through their neural bond, Jinho felt her anguish. The Korthak had always been proud and independent, never asking for help from other species. But their children were dying, and their traditional medicine wasn't enough. "What do they need?" Jinho asked, already knowing the answer. "They need me," Nara replied. "The Korthak Council is requesting my assistance. The same leaders who once called me weak are now asking for my help." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The gentlest Korthak, the one who had been rejected by her own society, was now their only hope for survival. Within hours, a joint mission was organized. Human scientist Minjae led a team of researchers, while Nara coordinated with her former apprentice Bora and several other Korthak medical students from the center. It was the first time in galactic history that Korthak and human medical teams had worked together. The journey to Korthak Prime took 3 days, during which Nara worked tirelessly to analyze samples and data transmitted from her homeworld. The plague was unlike anything she had seen before, a virus that attacked the delicate nervous systems of young Korthak, causing their natural control mechanisms to fail. "It's attacking exactly the neural clusters that allow us to be gentle," she explained to the team. "Without those clusters, young Korthak become nothing but rage and violence. They're losing what makes us capable of more than warfare." When they arrived at Korthak Prime, Jinho got his first look at Nara's homeworld. It was as harsh and beautiful as he had imagined. Crystal formations jutted from red rock under a violet sky, and the cities were built like fortresses to withstand constant storms. But now those cities were filled with grieving parents. Young Korthak lay in medical facilities, their small bodies racked with fever as their nervous systems failed. Without their precision control, they couldn't feed themselves or move safely. Many were dying from injuries they had inflicted on themselves. The Korthak Council met them at the primary medical facility. These were the same leaders who had once dismissed Nara as worthless, but now they stood before her with something Jinho had never seen from Korthak before: humility. "Gentle Claw," said Council Leader Thrak, using the old nickname but without mockery. "Our warriors cannot fight this enemy. Our scientists cannot understand it. We need your different approach." Working alongside human researchers and her former students, Nara threw herself into finding a cure. Her understanding of Korthak physiology, combined with human medical techniques and alien technology, created possibilities that none of them could have achieved alone. The breakthrough came on the fourth day. The virus wasn't just attacking randomly. It was specifically targeting the neural pathways that enabled emotional control and fine motor skills. It was as if the disease was trying to reduce the Korthak to their most primitive state. But that means we can fight it, Minjae realized. If we can strengthen those neural pathways instead of just treating the symptoms. The cure they developed was unlike anything in galactic medicine. It required precise surgery on neural tissue thinner than hair, performed while the patient was awake and aware. Only Nara's surgical skills made it possible, but only human understanding of neural chemistry made it effective. The first patient was a young Korthak named Vex, barely old enough to speak. As Nara worked on his neural tissue with movements too precise for human eyes to follow, Jinho watched through their bond as she poured all her skill and compassion into saving this one small life. When Vex opened his eyes after the surgery and carefully picked up a delicate flower without crushing it, the entire medical facility erupted in celebration. The gentleness that defined the best of Korthak nature had been saved. Over the following weeks, hundreds of young Korthak received the treatment. Each success proved that Nara's approach, combining strength with compassion, was not just valid, but essential for her species' survival. The council leader Thrak found Nara in the hospital garden on their last day on Korthak Prime. She was teaching recovered children how to tend to the hardy flowers that grew in the harsh soil, her movements gentle despite her fearsome appearance. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We called you weak for being gentle, but gentleness saved our children when strength could not." "I was never weak," Nara replied, helping a small child plant a seed. "I was just different. And sometimes different is exactly what the world needs." When they returned to Earth, news of the medical breakthrough had spread across the galaxy. The Korthak were no longer seen as mindless warriors, and other species began reaching out for help with their own medical challenges. The Integration Center expanded again, becoming a true galactic medical research facility. Students from hundreds of worlds came to learn from the Korthak Human Medical Partnership that had revolutionized healing techniques. But for Jinho, the most meaningful change was personal. The Galactic Alliance had officially established the Nara Protocol, a new guideline stating that species should be evaluated based on their actions and individual character, rather than their appearance or cultural reputation. It was a small change in official policy, but it represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy thought about differences between species. One evening, as they walked through the center's main hall, Jinho watched Nara help a mixed group of students, human, Valorian, Netherian, and Korthak, work together on a difficult medical problem. Her presence no longer frightened anyone. Instead, she had become a symbol of what was possible when beings looked past surface appearances. Admiral Minho, now a frequent visitor to the center, joined them for their weekly dinner. The man who had once begged Jinho to choose a safer partner now considered Nara one of his closest friends. "You know," he said, watching Nara carefully help an elderly human visitor with his walking aid, "when you chose the scariest bride at that ceremony, you actually chose the most beautiful one." Jinho smiled, feeling Nara's happiness through their bond as she successfully helped the visitor reach his chair safely. "I know," he replied. "I always knew she was special. I just had to help everyone else see it too." Through their neural link, he felt Nara's contentment. She had found her place in the galaxy, not as the weakest Korthak or the scariest alien, but as herself. A being who used her natural gifts to heal instead of harm, to create instead of destroy, and to prove that the most important strength was often the gentlest. As they watched the sun set over Earth's horizon, painting the sky in colors that reminded them both of the first day they met, Jinho reflected on how far they had all come. Fear had given way to understanding, prejudice had been replaced by cooperation, and the galaxy was stronger because someone had been brave enough to choose love over appearance. The Integration Center would continue to grow, spreading the message.